but also it was even more than that. It was just the love of the joy of playing that
Right.
these guys had so much fun. That was what got me. That was, I think, what did it. My daughter Emily was telling me last night. She said she was up in Toronto, and she said sometimes, Dad, these guys all play well, all these young cats, but you know what, Dad? They're not having any fun. They're not, and
I wrote a big blog about that, and I just rewrote it a little bit about that. To me, the dance, the joy, and the fun is missing out of music now, and I don't really like it, and I don't think people like it either. You
yeah,
know,
me too. I mean, that's what I think when you mentioned that at the beginning of our interview today, or whatever it is, our conversation, that this young alto player, that Bill Crow was talking about something, that's the first thing that somebody like Bill would hear is that this cat's not really,
he was a tenor player. I don't want to give it away, but he was playing tenor.
yeah, well, whatever it was, he wasn't having fun. And I think that that's a very strong feeling. I hear people playing a lot of interesting things and this and that, but it's interesting. Like the Chinese curse, may you marry an interesting man.
Right, right, right.
You know?
I got a Bob Minter story which kind of sums it up for me. And the way I learned was playing in the big bands, and the elders always giving me friendly advice or telling me something, And Bob Minter said when Buddy's band. He had one good story where he talked about that he had gone someplace to go hear a band, hear somebody play or something, and then I guess he got high or something and lost track of the time and had to run back to the band, and he was late, and he thought for sure he was fired, what I mean? He thought this was it. Buddy didn't fire him, but he did something that was funny to it. Buddy had to do something about it. But I think he said something to the audience or something. But Buddy, the short story is, Buddy came up to Bob once and said, you got all this Coltrane, you got all this, you're really deep into this Coltrane, but you need some of that Ben Webster and that Coleman Hawkins in your playing. And Bob said that changed his whole concept. And I bring that up because none of the young kids are getting to play first in big bands and learn what it's like to play with other people, to learn how to blend in a section, to learn that you have maybe 12 bars, 16 bars for your solo. And it's not about getting up there and playing a bunch of notes. You need to play something in context to what the band had just played, right?
Yeah.
You know, and uh, and you have to say it in a short amount of time. And then also people like Lionel Hampton used to say so many different learned things like to us about playing music. I find the kids today don't have that connection at all.
Well, I used to play club dates with my father. My father's a trumpet player, and he also played the theremin. But my dad had this like basically a club date band.
Hmm.
Miami, he did like that kind of stuff, and I would, he had a very interesting philosophy of tempo. He said, you got to always be careful, be right, make sure whatever tune you're playing is the right tempo, and that he said our job as musicians is basically we want these couples to go home and make good love with each other.
He sounds just like my brother. My brother used to say stuff like that.
Like even if maybe they were fighting a little earlier in the night,
Right.
but and maybe he said, but the main thing is that our music is like medicine for the soul. You're gonna make those
Right.
dancers dance close and desire each other, and that's what music is for. And so
It's so true. My brother told me a story and I never forgot it because I was interested in Eric Dolphy and all this different music and bebop and all this stuff. And he looked at me one day and said, because he played guitar and he played bass and he played piano and he would do gigs at clubs playing either of those instruments, or playing trumpet. He played trumpet with the George G. Big Band one night and wiped everybody out because his sound. The first thing my brother told me, he said to me, "What's the most important thing about your playing going to be, Marshall?" And he said, "It's going to be your sound. Your sound is what people," he said, "people have no idea what you're playing or what the notes mean or if it was some hip Charlie Parker lick. They don't know that. All they know is your sound. If it's a pleasant sound to them, they might like it." So he said, "You should focus on that." The next thing he told me a story, he said, folks work really hard all week. You know, maybe they're working in a steel mill, maybe they're working down the street with the doctor's office. They've got no money. You know, they're taking this woman, they're taking their wife or a girlfriend out on Friday night. They want to have a good time. They don't want to be lectured at and screamed at and have to listen. And he said if the woman isn't happy, the man's going to be very upset because he ain't going to get nothing that night. He said, when you go play at the club, you got to think about the people spent $15 to see you. That's a lot of money for them, you know?
Well, that's right. You gotta make them happy. And Melton, good old Melton Mustafa used to be Melton Jones. But did you get to know Melton?
I definitely, yeah, he was in the band several times. I'm sure that's probably what people want to hear about. So I'll spend a little moments talking about my experience with the big band. My friend nicknamed me Big Band Guy because
Right.
I've played with so many of them. It's kind of crazy. From I can't even think of them all. Lionel Hampton, Illinois Jacket, Paquito D'Rivera, the Basie Band. There were local big bands around New York, George G. I got to even do a few months with Illinois Jacket. So to be
Charlie
honest
Persip,
with you, what's that?
Charlie Persip, you played with him
Oh,
too, right?
Charlie Persip, I forgot about that. I actually had the lead alto chair in Frank Foster's Loud Minority Band, and I had a conflict, and I went out with another. I wanted to go out with another band, and Frank got pissed off at me because he needed me for his first tour, and boy, his wife called me up, Cecilia called me up and chewed me out, and then Frank called me up and chewed me out, and he fired me, and
Oh,
it was so depressing because the other band broke up, and that's when Bruce Williams took over the chair that we'd rehearsed for. And as I got older, I understood Frank's point of view, and I was very sad about losing that band because the arrangements were so incredible. You know what I mean?
that was
And he
great.
put
That's the Love and Order.
yeah, he had put me on lead alto of all things, but we make these decisions. It's so ironic now because as time has passed, there's such little work compared to back then when I was trying to sub on Jolly's Last Jam for Bill Easley on clarinet, and then I had Poquito's band, and then I was with Illinois' band, but I don't think my solo work was up to the level of what I needed to be, if you know what I mean. But again, as you said, I could read the parts really well. So a lot of times I got the jobs because I could read and follow the lead player, whatever I had to do, which is an art that I think a lot of young people don't understand. It's not just playing in the big band. You have to learn how to lock yourself into whatever the lead players in all the band, the trumpet, the trombone, and the lead alto are doing. It's not that you just play the part. Because no one in those bands, Buddy Rich or all those bands, are exactly playing the music like it's written, right? So you have to learn to have your ear wide open, to
Mhm.
learn how am I going to fit. So when I first got in the band full time, when Grover Mitchell hired me as a full time player, not a sub, Jackie Kelso, the great Jackie Kelso, who a lot of people don't know who he is, but he was part of the Wrecking Crew that people do know with Carol Kay and all of that. He and Plas Johnson and the others recorded almost everything we listened to, the Wrecking Crew. So Jackie was just astonishing to me when I first got into band. I think I did not know who he was really, and I did some
What happened
research.
to him? Where is he now?
Oh, Jackie Kelso passed away some years back, and I got Marshall Royal's last mouthpiece because Jackie had it, but he also had Marshall's last alto saxophone, and his girlfriend took it and gave it to a music store.
No.
I was horrified. I called Jackie up before he passed, and he asked me what I wanted, and I should have said, "Will you leave me all your instruments, please?" But I didn't say that. I didn't think of that. But so I got a bunch of the mouthpieces. I got the ones that he used in the studio recording, and Marshall Royal had one. Marshall would give him his last Runyon, which you see in videos with Lawrence Welk. So I have it. I have it as a memoir. But what I learned from Jackie is endless. The first thing he told me once, kind of like what you said, he told me one day, he pulled me aside and said, he always spoke very erudite. People thought he was white, but he was mixed, like my mother. He's half black, half white. He's a mixed mixed colored band, as they called him back in the day. You
Right.
know? So the two things I noticed about Jackie, his playing was extremely clean. Every time he played a solo or played a part, it was like clean, like and you just used some cleaning fluid on it. There was no garbles or mess or anything ever. And he told me he learned that from studio playing. You know, you have to get in front of the mic. The guy recording it needs it to be this way, and it's got to be exactly that way. Jackie at one point told me he didn't need to hear the playback anymore because he knew exactly how he had played, and I, I still have trouble doing that, you know. But he told me that he had gotten a trailer, and I asked Plas this later because I got to go to Plas Johnson's house and hang with
Oh,
Plas
that
after
little thing in Cherokee you guys did, it was nice.
that. Oh, that's right, that's right. And Jackie had got a trailer, you know, like one of those car trailers, and he was living outside the studio because Jackie said there was work 24 hours a day. And Jackie told me he would keep his horn on a music stand beside him, and when he rolled out of bed, he would start practicing and playing, right?
What studio was this?
I don't remember the studio that they recorded at, the Wrecking Crew. I really don't know what it was. It was in California, Los Angeles, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And Plas verified that. I said, "Is that true?" And Plas said, "Yes, he was living in a trailer outside the studio, and he lived music 24 hours a day." Now the one day Jackie pulled me aside and he said, "You have more than enough technique to play the rest of your life. You don't need to keep practicing that. But what you don't have is the dance. There's no dance in your playing." You know, and I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And and he did this in front of the band, and they were all starting to look like, "Oh, look at him, what's going on?" You know, and then he turned around, and I don't want to use the F word, but he said, "F those motherfuckers, just ignore them and listen to me." So he said, "Jazz is dance music, and the way it is, it's like step, touch, step, touch, step, touch, touch, step, step, touch, touch, step." And he started demonstrating with his feet. He said, "I will do this when I play music." And he said, "I learned it from Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy Gillespie taught me that this is dance music." That's why he said you saw Dizzy moving his feet like that, not because he was trying to be, look good for the audience, because it's dance music. So he said, if you could learn that you can play your saxophone and you can do the step, touch, touch, step, step, and dance. That's what the music is about, he told me. And it was the most profound lesson I've ever had. And he also meant that if you're playing lead alto, if you're playing second alto, you have to have that element in your playing while you're playing those parts. You just can't play the part. You have to remember this, it's a dance.
Yeah, well, that's a very that's interesting because I have given that lesson to people. I
Hmm.
had a student come over, a guy who took a lesson with me like 30 years ago or something. And this is like last year we were talking. He said, "Man, I took this lesson with you 30 years ago, and I remember what you had me do." I said, "What did I do?" He said, "You said my time was stiff, so you had me walk around your house dancing with my saxophone. You made me, because I told him you would feel the pocket in half because the tempo's going like this. If you're going, love for sale, you can't dance like that. You got to divide it in half. Love for sale, uh, uh, uh. And, so that's how you play tempos. If you try to feel the tempo and you're always feeling this, then
Right.
you're not going to be able to play a tempo. But if you're feeling this, you put the dance in any tempo, and that's what,
Right.
the guy said it was a good lesson. And I said, yeah, I probably did that. I give everybody different lessons.
Well, that you and I were talking about earlier, that's for me what's missing from the young players who go to college and have all this technique and even some of the elder players are now who are mature and have so much technique, but there's no dance or joy in it at all.
Yeah, I think that's a very big part of the reason why. I mean, I don't really go out to clubs now because of my physical condition. I'm not supposed to be around where I could get germs. But I'll tell you, if this was 30 or so years ago, I'd be really pining to go out. I really want to go out, but now I don't really feel there's that many things I really want to go out for.
Right, right.
And I
Well,
would say,
they're not teaching this in the colleges. They're teaching notes and progressions and enclosures and leading tones. I saw this young gentleman analyzing a John Coltrane solo, talking about how here he uses an enclosure and now he's got an approach tone. And I wrote underneath, I said, I know for a fact that Mr. Coltrane was not thinking that way.
that's funny because actually I just wrote I'm in the middle of writing my latest, I wrote this lexicon of phrases, that is one of a book that came out. Now I'm working on a volume called Serious Fun, How to Developing a True Jazz Feeling and a True Jazz Conception. That's my second book. So I was writing, I was actually talking about enclosures. And I said, now you see, here's enclosures and arpeggios. I said, all of these things, I'm showing you what these things are in this book because these are part of the vocabulary of the music. But I would be really happier if you never played an enclosure. If you avoid enclosures, arpeggios, and scale cliches as often as you can. I mean, it really makes me happy as your teacher. Let me not have to listen to you ever do this. I mean, you should know what it is so you can avoid doing it or use it when only it's necessary. But don't think of it as that, because
Right.
I don't want to hear, I mean, I wanted to say if I have to go out and hear another person go, ba-do-be-dee-da-da-da, I might jump off a bridge.
Yeah, I think people are thinking from their heads and not from their ears. They're not singing what they would play. They're not. Someone told me once that if you're not playing what you would sing, you're not really being true to what you're hearing.
Yeah, and I think that, even the idea of having to play what you sing is not as important as just singing it.
Just singing it, right?
Because when you start to play what you've been singing, like say you're listening to a lesser, now there's a certain amount of solos you might want to learn them and just to play them to do that. But I don't feel it's necessary. I feel it's much more necessary to sing the solo and really understand the feeling. Because singing the solo, you get into your unconscious process
Right, right.
of creation and what it really feels like to play, um, to
Well, when you sing it from your mouth, it goes back into your ears again. It's like you're singing out into your ears, and we know now that a different part of the brain processes music than we thought it was. A neurological. You've probably seen the movie called Alive Again. If you haven't, I suggest it. It's about these Alzheimer's patients who I watched it during COVID. A brilliant movie which brought me to tears. These patients who really had no life, they weren't talking, they weren't looking, nothing was happening. They finally figured out if you played certain songs for them, it's like they would come alive. They could start talking, they would start dancing, and they discovered neurologically that there's a different part of the brain that's processing in the brain that's not destroyed. And I was speaking to Dr. Nelson Harrison, a musician who used to play with Count Basie in Pittsburgh for a long time. We keep in touch. He played with Basie when Basie was alive, so I'm always honored to talk to anyone who played with Basie when he was alive. And he was also he got his PhD in neurology or something. He was explaining to me that the latest finds. You'll love this movie. It's deeply moving.
well, I was alive again.
Alive Again.
You got to check it out.
I wanted to finish more about about the Basie band experience because Basie told everyone in the band that he wanted people to feel like they were coming to a party when they came to see his band. I think one of the reasons that the band has survived so much longer than maybe any of the bands has is because the people try to Scotty Barnhart tries to continue that because he was under Frank Foster and other people, and there's not many people left that play with Count Basie. Maybe Clarence Banks is the last one left in the band, I think. you know, but the band tries that. It's getting harder now because the band has not as much work, and when you don't have as much work, you lose that, that playing together sensation. But for me, the reason it survived, even out of the Duke Ellington band, it has not really ever had that much work like the Basie band, or never had that kind of, how do I say, following. Following would be the correct word. Is because when you go see the Basie band even today, you feel good when you're done. You know what I'm trying to say? You don't feel like someone's been lecturing you or trying to teach you
Yeah.
something or beating you over the head. You just feel like you had a good time and you're really looking forward to going home with your lady.
Yeah, well, that's my father was crazy about Count Basie. I mean, when he was in high school, he had a band in Boston with a pianist named Al Vega, who just died a few years ago at 90 something. And they played the Basie charts in the early 40s. That's what they did. They and because it made them feel good, it made people want to dance. And my dad liked Duke. He was fond of that, but he's just said that as great as Duke was, it just didn't swing the same way as Basie.
Right.
There was just a certain way that band swung that was really um, very special. I mean, it might have to do with Joe Jones, with
I,
Jonathan
I I think it
Jones.
had to do with Count Basie himself, knowing what he wanted. Bill Hughes said that he was a very strong, quiet leader. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, one could see that. I mean, one can, that's what, yeah, I mean, I was talking with Sonny Rollins one time, and Sonny was mentioning that saxophone players were, in essence, a lot of the time, translators of pianists.
Hmm.
And, he was saying how, like, Bird, Coleman Hawkins, and horn players, you know, um, were coming out of like trying to get Tatum to translate Tatum, and also to translate uh, not just Tatum, but Charlie also started to translate Bud and Monk as well. But he started out with Tatum, and how Prez, in his own way, was translating Count's rhythmic
Mm,
concept in a certain way. Just
right.
the not so much in every note that he played, but the same. You can really feel that there is a way that, in a way, Lester Young and Buck Clayton and those guys, their sense of economy and their sense of musicality, the whole thing. There is a Basie looms very large over everybody.
I agree, and I was fortunate to play with Melton and I can't remember the name of the lead trombone player now who played with Basie. It was Bill Hughes was in the band, and Bob Ojeda was in the band, and then that
Boom.
was 1994, and I got to meet. And then during our travels, everyone who played with Basie or would come to the shows. You know what I mean? So it was an amazing educational and experience, and one that I've become very proud of when I listen back to the band and how I played on the lead chair and how I developed and how you have to learn how to emote and read the part, and we had discussed privately about sight reading, and I'm an excellent sight reader. I'm not sure if I'm as good now as I gotten older, but maybe I could do it. So some of those charts were not some, most of them were just handed out in the studio. Like, and we did some records at Capitol Records. We did some in Japan, it came out really well. And a musician or a lead player needs to learn how to interpret the part on the spot. That's what Jackie was telling me. Jackie told me you come to the studio, and there was no music ahead of time, and you have a certain amount of time, and the producer has a certain amount of money, and you have to get this down in one or two takes. That's one thing he taught me. He said there's no time to experiment and to think about it. You have to get it in there and get the job done or the producer's going to be very upset. And that,
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
But that was the thing that these cats could do. And once you had that training with Basie, that was to be something that just is something like you've injected that like a drug in you for the rest of your life. You have that ability to not to just sight read, but to sight read with the right feeling. If you've absorbed Basie's feeling, then any type of music that's in that type of style, you've mastered. Also, by the way, Harold Jones.
Oh, Harold Jones.
Yeah,
We recorded with Harold. He came to the band quite often. Bill Hughes told me that that was secretly Count Basie's favorite drummer.
and I had 2 nights with Harold Jones at Pearls in San Francisco when I did a West Coast tour. It was Putter Smith on bass and a pianist named Kent Glenn, who since has left us. And Kent arranged the gig. He was a friend of mine, and he said, "Man, I got a real surprise for you." He said, "You're going to really be very happy with this weekend." And man, I'd never played with Harold Jones. I'd never even really heard that much of him.
Hmm.
And it changed my life. 2 nights with Harold Jones, I I mean, he was swing.
Right.
That was the essence of that's why I'm in music. He's one of those guys that gave me the feeling, yeah, this is why I got into this. Sometimes
Exactly.
I want.
I know what you mean. Me too. We did a Christmas session with Tony Bennett. The Basie band has brought me so many incredible experiences, and the people I've met has been the who's who of music by playing with Count Basie's band. I can't express the learning and and Lionel Hampton was the other person. The who's who of people came to sit in with Lionel or talk about music because he was older and he was alive, and everyone came to the gigs.
Yeah,
So meeting these people and talking to them, um, what we did a session with Tony Bennett of all people, and a Christmas record, and Harold Jones was the drummer. I was told that Harold Jones was Tony Bennett's preferred drummer for all things he had to do. And it was just Harold was so tasteful and so slick and so polished but swinging with such swing, infectious swing, without forcing it upon you. Do you know what I mean by that?
I do know. I mean, I really know now because I played those 2 nights with him, and I couldn't believe how just everything just was just put in just the right place.
And the young musicians are not getting this experience. You go to college, you sit in the room, you've got all of these notes and enclosures, and then you have the audacity to analyze Charlie Parker solos and say he's playing enclosures when he's not playing enclosures. He was not. What I mean by that, his mind would not. He wouldn't. If you had said you played an enclosure, he would look at you like, "What are you talking about?"
Right. I mean, I never thought of them as enclosures until my students started telling me I did it. I mean, I've been playing that long that when I started playing enclosures, I didn't even know that there was such a term for them. They were neighbor notes. I
Hello.
mean, they were
I
called,
had to ask Bob Minzer. I felt embarrassed. I thought, man, I don't know what I'm doing in music. I had to email Bob Minzer one day and said, do you know what these things are? These approach notion enclosures are. I don't know what they're even talking about. And Bob was honest, wrote back and said, Marshall, when I first started teaching in California, I had never heard of these terms. He said, you and I grew up by listening to records and picking off solos off of records and singing the stuff and learning it that way. And we didn't learn to think this way. He said it's very helpful for when you're doing arrangements and stuff like that. He can see the benefit of it. But he admitted he had never heard of that at all. So.
yeah, it wasn't something that that you did. But I mean, but the thing is that I think that the essence of swing that a guy like Harold Jones gives the music, and then the Basie band, and that's something that's, well, even the 4/4 is leaving the music that people. I mean, I guess you can play retrospective music. You can play music. We can play something that sounds like it's 1939 and codify it and do that. But the hardest thing to do is take the spirit of what Basie is about and play something fresh with it. Rather than something that's just imitative of something. I think that there was some very successful music that was played. That's why I used to love Zoot Now and Bob Brookmeyer and Bud Johnson. That spirit of swing that was really, in fact, on YouTube, I see some records that I missed from like the 1950s,
Right, right.
just with the drummers that were like O.C. Johnson and Gus Johnson and Dave Bailey and these kind of guys that were really coming out of the Basie feeling. Like, Harold Jones, I mean, he did get to play with Basie, but he was destined to, he always had that feeling. I'm sure even before he played with Basie, he had the Basie magic. He had that
Right,
Basie
right.
mojo was there. And, all of those cats had it.
Yeah, I know. I learned a lot from Bill Hughes. That's one of the reasons I want to write a book. Because I spoke with a music producer and an author in here in Japan who's American, and I've told him a lot of my stories, and he said, you're one of the last remaining group of people that got to work with all these people, with Lionel Hampton, and all these people are now gone. You really should write it down so people can hear these stories about how they looked at music. Did you know that the band, you probably knew it, the band did not like Sonny Payne when Count Basie first hired him?
I didn't know that, but I know that his father was a drummer. I got to speak to Sonny Payne's father a couple of times. Brooks Kerr knew him. I mean, I know that he came from a very musical swing background, but I didn't know, well, he was heavy-handed compared to.
Thank you. That's what I was going to bring up. Bill said that the band thought he was too loud. They thought he was too heavy. They thought he was too flashy. They didn't get it. Bill came out and said that people were mumbling and grumbling and wondered why Basie hired this guy. But then Bill said later, as time passed, as time went on, and when they got to Las Vegas, and the famous recordings and the twirling of the six and all that just took off. Bill said, we learned that once again, Mr. Basie was correct and saw a vision which we didn't see. They had a nickname for him. It was Sweetie Cakes or something like that. I can't remember what they called him. But
Because there was, as far as I remember, after Papa Joe, there was Sonny Payne and there was Rufus Jones for a minute too, who had the two bass drums.
right.
And then I'm trying to think of other, other Basie drummers, and I don't really know. I know that Papa Joe.
Butch Miles came in, and he came in as a sub. Bill Hughes told me the whole story. He said Butch Miles came in as a sub. I can't remember who was playing drums. Maybe somebody else was playing drums at the time. And Bill also said there was a time when the band had financial trouble. That's why they made that James Bond record and Beatles record and all that stuff. He said because basically that there was financial issues going, trying to lead a big band. But they got. Butch came in as a sub for the regular drummer. Had hurt his hand or something, Bill told me. And they called Bill Bub, Bub, hey Bub. And Bill was the source of a lot of my stories and stuff that he talked about. And he said that so we had the first week, he said, the first thing everyone noticed is this: Butch didn't open up the book. He knew all of the music, he said. So we were kind of surprised about that. And he said the next thing happened when it got to the end of the time, when the other guy was supposed to come back. He said Basie never really said a lot of words. Bill told me, sometimes he would just say a few words and then listen to whatever he had to say. So, they get together, and Bill was very close with Count Basie himself as a friendship. They were very close, and Basie was there quiet, didn't say anything. When he says, "You hear this kid?" And Bill said, "Yep." Basie got quiet again and said, "I can't let him go." And then Bill said,
Butch Miles.
"Yeah." And then Bill said, "Nope." And then they both just stood there for like a few minutes, didn't say anything. He said, and then Basie said, "All right." So he actually sent a notice to the other guy and said, "We won't be needing your services any longer." And that's how Butch Miles got into the band.
And how long did he play on that band?
He played quite a while. I don't know the exact number of years. It was Grover Mitchell who brought him back into the band later. If you remember, he played for some number of years, and then Grover changed the band. The truth of what happened, I was there in the office because I was in the band on tour with the band when the ownership of the band decided to make a change with the leadership of the band. The ownership of the band and the management of the band was afraid that it was becoming too much like the Frank Foster band and not so much like the Count Basie Orchestra. That's actually what happened, and I don't mean that in any demeaning way, but
Yeah.
I was there when they discussed it with me when I was there in the office when they were talking about it. And simply that meant that the audience always came to hear the Basie songs, And Frank does a lot of prolific writing and arrangements, and it's hard for someone like Frank Foster to be a ghost band. Do you know what I mean? To be a
Yeah, I mean, Frank had a strong personality of his own. I knew
right.
Frank a little bit too, and
Well, they decided they would bring Grover Mitchell wanted to bring back the traditional style of the Basie Orchestra. So that's actually why the management hired Grover Mitchell. It was the end of a long tour that I'd done with the band, like 3 months with Frank and stuff, going to Japan, I think, and other places. And Grover's concept was he wanted to restore that Basie sound. So he called Butch Miles, Jackie Kelso, and all these people. He had a thing with Mel Wanzo. Maybe it was a personal thing. Mel Wanzo had played with bass and played lead trombone, and I always liked Mel Wanzo's playing. I liked him. I liked Mel Wanzo, but Grover, being in the trombone section, for some reason fired Mel Wanzo and brought in Dave Kime, who was from the Stan Kenton band or some other band, and he did a great job. But Grover basically changed the whole band. The first thing he said, "You're all playing too damn loud." Basie never played loud. He taught the band. He said Basie had an acoustic guitar player, and we always thought if you couldn't hear him playing on the guitar, you were playing too damn loud. He said the only time we played with full volume was the shout chorus, if you listen really carefully. And so, and I learned that from Grover. He
yeah,
said dynamics. The dynamics are the essence of the Basie band. He said.
oh, absolutely, yeah, that was yeah. I mean, you had to be able to play Little Darling. I mean,
And then the way we phrase, Grover taught. I learned from the band and Danny and Kenny the phrasing. If you listen to Little Darling, we turn those into quarter note triplets. We go ba da ba 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 da ba. The ba da da do da 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 da. Ba da da do da 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 da. Not the way everyone goes to go ba ba da da. We're not
like
playing
eight
that.
notes, yeah, they're quarter note triplets.
That's right. So that the interpretations, what Grover wanted to restore was the interpretations was made the band so great. You know what I mean? And it always came from the elders. And so there's so much more to the music than the notes on the paper. And I'm afraid that a lot of young musicians don't understand it's not the notes on the paper or how many notes you can play.
Well, but Frank, on the other hand, I mean, I think he felt that it was a temporary gig. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't inside his head, but he was always a more modern musician. From like his early days playing with Monk. I mean, he
Oh
was
yeah.
really, so I think he would have felt like kind of restricted by that. By being, you had to have somebody who wanted to play it really authentically. To play the
Right.
basic sound and keep it in the era that it was from. And I think
Right.
Frank was more more of a visionary type of cat.
Oh, he was definitely a visionary. We had in Charlie Precip's big band, Frank, and how the band got started was Frank Foster gave Charlie Precip, when he heard he wanted to start a big band, a whole bunch of his charts, like throughway traffic and all this stuff. It was in the book. Precip had the most advanced. I don't know where the book went. I'm kind of bummed out about that. I don't know where Charlie Precip's music is, or did someone throw it away, or what? That's astonishing. I don't know. He was very sick at the end of his life, and I don't know what happened. But long story short, there was one that Frank gave him all these arrangements, And Frank wrote this thing called Throughway Traffic. I don't know if you've even ever heard it. You know, it's online somewhere possibly. And we had a Discommotion in Charlie Persip's book too. And Throughway Traffic was so advanced and so modern, man. And I hate to use that word, but I don't think anyone. I asked Frank, how did you learn how to arrange, and were you influenced by Thad Jones? And then he got a little huffy with me and said, "Well, Thad and me were in the band at the same time, so we were learning off of each other. You know, I wasn't
And
influenced
they were
by
both
Thad
from
Jones."
Detroit.
Oh, I didn't know that. Both from Detroit.
Yeah.
So he said, you know, we would influence each other the way we were writing stuff at the time. I was like, oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's the truth to that. And I think that they were kind of, had the chance to learn that way. Anyway, it's wonderful that you got to do that for the time you did. And I think we're sort of running out of time here because I think we got 2 episodes of this.
I know.
I'm just trying to think, did we leave anything, did we leave any turn unstoned, as they say?
Turned unstoned. We covered a lot of stuff, and we enjoyed talking to each other. You'll have to edit it down, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I think we got a lot of good things, and it's been great to have you, Marshall. It's been great to talk to you. Well, let's talk a little bit about Japan for a minute. Now you've been going over there and actually more or less living. How are you dividing your time? Are you mostly over there?
I'm probably in Japan now. As you know, my wife is Japanese, and we met through the Count Basie Orchestra when I was playing at the Tokyo Blue Note in 2011. So the Count Basie Orchestra has been a very heavy influence on my life. So we met in 2011, and we were married in 2015. We just celebrated 10 years of marriage now. Because of the pandemic and everything, life kind of blew up, as you know, and so I'm basically here 11 months out of the year and maybe 1 month in the United States right now. But so we have some things to sort out. But Bob, I miss the United States because the level of playing around the New York area is so high, and I was always getting gigs, and honestly, I miss that. We live in Fukuoka, Japan, not Tokyo, where her family's medical business is. So Japan's a different culture than America, and it's hard to explain that to people. In spite of our political problems we might have or divisions, the music in America is extraordinary. I mean, it's one of a kind in America.
Well, it is, but again, there's another generation. Some of it is like there's really some very talented young people I'm teaching and playing with. That's true, and it's still, New York is New York. It's nothing,
Right.
nothing like it, But it's of course, there's the political thing which we won't get into because then we'll go another 2 hours on that.
Right.
But I think that what part of you're not in Tokyo, right? You told me you're in a different city now in
We're in
Japan.
Fukuoka, Japan. It's southern Japan. We can actually see the bay from our window. It's like an ocean town, if you will. It's close to the ocean. There used to be a Blue Note here. So with Frank Foster, I actually played all the Blue Notes in Tokyo. Fukuoka Blue Note, Osaka, Nagoya, and Tokyo. We did a tour of that, and I can't tell people how much I learned from Frank Foster and Grover Mitchell and Kenny Hing and Danny Turner and anybody, all those cats. That's where you go to school. I mean, I had technique and I could read, but you learn how to play when you're hanging out with cats like that, right, Bob?
Yeah, that's absolutely how you learn. Yep, you gotta just sit there and take it in. and, so,
Well, I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I have such respect for your playing and your alto playing and the way that your stylistic playing and your articulation. I'm still trying to get that together on the alto. I can tenor and alto articulations are different. People don't understand that. I got really immersed in the tenor years ago. When I got a tenor, I just loved it. I was like, oh, I love tenor. I'm a tenor player. but it's two different things you're doing at the reed with the tenor and the alto, if you know what I mean by that. If you know what I'm trying to say.
I that's all I do.
You can't, but in other words, you can't play a tenor like you would play alto.
No, but when I played the tenor, I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. It was pretty much it heard itself, you know, it heard its uh, tenor, just the sound of it made me articulate it the way that I knew it wasn't an alto. So it just did it,
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
but I didn't think about it. I just like, you know, when you play it, you get used to it. I think soprano.
Have you ever have you ever heard some alto players though that when they play tenor they sound like an alto player playing a tenor?
Yeah, I've heard more tenor players that play the alto like tenor players playing alto. You know, I mean, there's a, I think, yeah. I mean, sometimes I think it's all, to me, sound is just something you hear in your head. If
Right.
you don't hear the instrument the way that's your own, then I don't think you're gonna do it. You know, I mean, I just felt like tenor was when you find the right setup. You know, it might take you a minute, but once you found the right reed and mouthpiece, then I think that's a lot of the trouble there. Any of the
Right.
articulation is going to come from finding the right, because what you want is the sound you hear in your head, and that takes the right setup. You know, so I think I try to find the mouthpiece and reed that would be the right, the right feeling for me, because that's important.
Actually, you could probably edit this in some place because everyone always asks me. Kenny Hing had left me a one of his alto mouthpieces was the New York Meyer small chamber, which I shouldn't have altered, but I did. I had Ted Klum refine it just a little bit, but it worked quite well. On the Ray Charles Basie Swings record, I don't know if you've heard that, that's where we recorded with an old Ray Charles with Count Basie track and re-recorded the band because it wasn't done. It was a live recording. If you listen to that record, I had been studying with Dave Tafani. People might like to know this,
Oh,
who
I love
changed
that.
what he changed what I was doing at the reed. I was having some intonation trouble, not supporting the reed correctly, and I spent maybe a year or two driving to his house, and he was changing what I was doing up here, which was so important. And on that record, I'm really proud of it. I was using Kenny Hing's mouthpiece, and I was doing the techniques that Bob had me practicing, all those Joe Allard stuff, and it was extraordinary.
Uh, and you mean Dave Tafani had you practice? Is that?
Yes, I was taking lessons with him because I was having like I felt kind of I called him because I felt I was having some pitchy issues and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, he's got all that together. He's very consummate, and very good pitch, and very, very, very fine alto player.
I
I love
learned a lot from him. He's not always the soloist type of cat, but he was a big studio cat.
He can really play the horn, though. He's another cat I really like, though, who is a good soloist, really nice soloist, and not doesn't get enough credit is Bobby Porcelli.
Oh man, I could tell stories how I was in Chico's band when Bobby would come back and play sometimes, and man, what a force! Oh my God! And one time he just turned to me and said, "You're rushing! Stop rushing!" I was playing second alto. And he was just so strong. I felt like a small child, if you know what I mean. Like I'm like, here I am beside this giant guy, and I'm like, I was just, oh my God, is this the level of what it is in New York?
Yeah, Bobby was state of the art. Yeah, we had some good times with each other. We used to like to play with him, and Dick Oates
Right.
was fun too. I had a lot of fun with Dick Oates. You know,
Oh, Dick Oates, he's a monster.
yeah, playing two altos. It's like really, it's fun when competition is healthy like that. Like we just
Right,
really
right,
wanted to make each other sound better.
right.
You never, because you knew if you were going for the jugular, you're never going to make those guys sound bad. So you might as well make them sound better and then they make you sound better, and then everybody wins. That
Right.
was, to me, is the competition, the competitive spirit. Some people just have that idea all wrong too. Like the idea was you never really wanted to make somebody go home with their tail between their legs. I would play with Pepper Adams, and Pepper was there to kill you. He was taking no prisoners. Um, he absolutely was going to get you. But, I don't think he really wanted you to be embarrassed by it, because then you weren't worthy of his competition.
Wow.
Like, no, you don't want to be, you got to hang in there and, like, throw a few good left hooks before he knocks you out. You
I
know?
get it. My first gig was on baritone with Lionel Hampton. I meant to mention that you want to break these down into smaller segments. I think you had asked me about the reed thing, and Nathan Davis had me play all the saxophones, including baritone, because he said there wasn't much work available for jazz, and I like jazz, which was the best thing he ever told me. So he gave me four different saxophones to play at a time. Not at once, but like first tenor, and then it was gave me soprano, and we went to Trinidad with the big band, but all I did was practice soprano on the bus. I really liked to practice. They were having a party, and I was sitting there practicing. But the baritone, when I first got the Lionel Hempel gig, uh, Bill Titone called up. The famous Bill Titone called me up and said, "Wait, Leon Dorsey recommended you. We need someone to play on blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, I'm good." And he goes, at the very end of the call, he goes, "Oh, the gig's on baritone, okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." I didn't have a baritone. And I went and written one at Rod Baltimore. I didn't tell any of the band that. You know what I mean? When I got there, they're like, "Who do you like on baritone?" And Pepper Adams was who I liked. So I said, "I like Pepper Adams." And I just kept quiet. You know what I'm saying? That's how I got the gig. And fortunate because Nathan had me play all the instruments at school, saying there's not much work out here. You got to be ready to do whatever you got to do.
I played one birthday party of Lionel Hampton's in Basel, Switzerland. He had a friend named Elmer Gill.
Hmm.
Elmer
I
was
don't remember him.
there, and they had been friends for a very long time.
Hmm.
And he invited me to come to Hamp's birthday party and play, because they had a little combo. He was playing, and they had the vibe set up and everything. So I got to play Midnight Sun with
Hmm.
him, and a blues. We didn't play Flying Home, but we played a
Oh,
blues at Midnight Sun. And then I sat near him at dinner. We sat, and I got to sit by him, and he was very nice to me. He was very complimentary, and said he'd like to hire me, but I probably want too much money.
that sounds like Gates.
But he was nice. He was very, very, very positive about my playing. So that was. Uh,
Yeah, he was integrating bands a long time ago, and the reason he did that is because of Benny Goodman, but Benny Good, not Goldman, good Benny Goodman. You couldn't say anything bad about Benny Goodman to Lionel Hampton. I mean, he told me a lot of stories about playing with Benny, how Benny protected him, and what was it, Teddy Wilson, I think, and
yeah.
he told me a story about how one time someone came to the table, they were sitting there eating, and somebody said, I had to use the word. What's this nigger doing here with you, Mister Goodman? And he said Benny Goodman grabbed his clarinet and stood up and said, "If you don't move away from this table now, I'm going to slam this clarinet over your head. You better move away from here."
Oh yeah. No, he was definitely. There were good points, good things about him. There were.
I
I
know he
mean,
had the dark side.
well, I think the funniest line I heard was Zoot Sims when he went to Russia with Benny. They took that band over for the first time. They had a American jazz band in Russia, and somebody said, "Oh, Zoot, didn't you go to Russia with Benny Goodman?" He said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, what was it like being in Russia with Benny Goodman?" He said, "Every day with Benny was like being in Russia."
Right.
Anyway, we got to say goodbye. Otherwise, we're going to talk. It's gonna poor Jesse's gonna be up for 3 weeks editing this thing.
Yeah, it was fun.
No, I've had a ball. It's been great, Marshall. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I know you've enjoyed Mr. Marshall McDonald as our distinguished guest tonight on The Real Side. Please give us a like, click on like, and become a subscriber. It doesn't cost anything to become a subscriber. And we will see you the next time on The Real Side. Thanks
Thank you,
again.
Bob.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks.
Arigato gozaimasu. See you.